My name is Bree. I'll be taking you through a 20-minute beginner mat Pilates series. So just to help to get the body moving, the blood moving, and the breath moving, to help get out any kinks or stuck places throughout your body. All right, so let's start in a seated position. I want you to bring yourself down to the side and rolling onto your back. So making sure you have enough space if you were to reach your arms out to the side, that there's nothing obstructing your hands from reaching down onto the ground. And then let's bring our attention to our breath. So maybe letting the hands rest onto the one on the belly, one on the rib cage, so that as you're inhaling in through the nose and out through the mouth, I want you to notice what's going on in the body. Do you feel like the top of your chest is rising and falling? Or can you feel the space where your hands are placed starting to rise and fall? So now as I'm talking, practicing your breath here and listening to the cues that I'm giving to you. So with those feet that are planted about hip distance apart, making sure that they're nice and heavy into the ground. So that as you're inhaling and exhaling, now I want you to feel the sides of the body expanding out towards the sides of your room. Ooh, and then as you exhale, what did we notice? What I noticed is that it felt like my spine just got a lot longer in the middle of my body. So now taking that inhale into the sides of the body and maybe into the back of the body. So as you're exhaling, all of that energy that you just expanded out contracts inward towards the center. So can you find the center of your body? Bringing your awareness to that powerhouse. So our powerhouse is where the pelvis is. So the hip crease of your legs, where the bony parts of your hips are. Okay, it's actually called your pelvis. And then to the base of your rib cage. So your powerhouse is all of that space, front, side, back, in between the pelvis and the rib cage. So drawing your attention there, and imagine that that breath continues to expand outward and downward, out to the sides and down into the ground. Now bringing your awareness to your pelvic floor, and I like to place my hands on my butt to just make sure that I'm not clenching my glutes here, because the powerhouse is not the booty, but it is the space of muscles right in between the legs. So that pelvic floor engagement actually comes from lifting the butthole up inside of you. And yes, I just said butthole, everybody's got one. So let's just work with anatomy terms that at least everybody knows. So that pelvic floor a majority of it surrounds the butthole. So if you can think about lifting it up like you're trying to hold in a fart or like you're trying not to poop your pants, placing the hands there on your glutes, on your booty, and making sure that you're not clenching the butt and you're not squeezing the butt, but you're lifting that pelvic floor up and in on your exhale. Then on your inhale, let it drop. Let it relax. And then as you exhale, pick it back up again. Like you have a blueberry in your pants. I know this may sound weird, but imagine you got a blueberry in your pants and you're trying to relax the pelvic floor around that blueberry, so that as you exhale, lift that blueberry up inside of you without like clenching or popping it. Inhale, place the blueberry back down at the base of your pants, and then exhale, lift it back up. Okay, so that pelvic floor is working now. So now as you have that pelvic floor work, I want you to bring your awareness to the band across and in between your hips and your ribs. So nice little middle point is your belly button. So the space right around your belly button. Imagine that all of that exhale is helping to pull that tummy nice and flat. If you can think about your hip points, so the boniest part of your pelvis, those hip points there, I want you to think about there's a band wrapped around and tightening with each exhale. So that band around your hip points, pulling the hip points together and helping to lift that pelvic floor up, helping to drop that belly down to help to flatten the front of the stomach, front of the belly. It's not actually the stomach, stomach's an organ. And now as you inhale, open the sides of the body, lengthen the lower back, let the pelvic floor drop. And then as you exhale, pick the pelvic floor back up, pull those two hip points together, feeling the rib cage now coming together. And what do we notice? There may be things that you notice that I may not cue, but just taking mental notes of these things so that the next time you're practicing the breath on your own, that you can say like, oh yeah, I remembered that. Now I'm gonna try that again, okay? So this is your powerhouse, that pelvic floor, that belly button pulling down in towards the spine. That's called your transverse abdominis, and then your diaphragm, which is helping the rib cage pull together. Okay, so it's important to know these things. You don't have to memorize them, but it's empowering to know about your body. Okay, so now placing the hands down next to the hips, and let's make it a full body experience. So can you press down and reach the fingertips away from you and soften the shoulders away from the ears, and feel how the collarbones are getting wider. And it's not that we're trying to like poof out the chest, but instead lengthening out through the spine and feeling as if we could like almost push our hands through the earth here. Inhaling, remember expanding the rib cage, breathing into the low back, and as you exhale, tailbone stays long as that pelvic floor pulls up inside of you. Belly button drops, rib cage pulls together. Now bringing attention to your legs, to your feet, making sure they're heavy down into the earth. Imagine you have a yoga block in between your legs, or a pillow, or a squishy ball, and you're trying to squeeze into that object without actually moving the legs. And now trying to pull the legs apart from each other without, again, actually moving the legs. So notice how all of that like imagination that we're having to connect to, this is your mind working. It is a mind-body workout. So let's be as efficient and effective with these 20 minutes that we have, and let's move through it. So now as you're inhaling, I want you to feel that length of the spine and starting to rock the pelvis forward. So maybe you even feel like your whole body is starting to like pull down towards the heels of the feet. And then as you exhale, sink the belly button down, tailbone maybe pulls up away from the earth, and you feel that core on the front starting to get a little shorter. Not because we're squeezing our glutes to lift the booty up, but we're rocking the pelvis forward and back, inhaling it forward, and then exhaling it back. If your pelvis was like a rocking chair and my hands are around my pelvis, that rocking chair is going forward and then back. Inhaling forward and back. So now what do you notice about the low back? As you rock forward, maybe you get a little bit of space there underneath of your low back. And then as you exhale, pulling that low back down towards the ground, lifting that belly button up and in, pelvic floor up and in, and continuing to rock back and forth. So we're just opening up the tissue around the low back, around the hips, and maybe let's place the thumbs right into your hip crease and making sure that those front of the hips are still nice and soft. So let's keep everything juicy and just working through the deep core, not the superficial core. A lot of us from in those seated positions, our hip flexors can get super tight, and that may be also what's causing any sort of low back pain. Okay, so just working through and strengthening the front of the body to help lengthen the back of the body, to help soften the front of the hips. Okay, so if we have a strong core, then we have a healthy back, we have healthy hips. It's like if the core is our centerpiece, which it is, and it's working properly, then the whole body will kind of fall into place from there. Okay, so now let's find that Goldilocks position between that rock forward and that rock back. So the way that we do that is you can place the heel of your palms, so the boniest part of your heels, on the boniest part of your hips, and then your finger pads onto the boniest part of your pelvis on the front there. So that's called your pubic bone. So as your hands are on your hips here, let's make sure that they're nice and level. And I like to connect my thumbs and my fingertips together, so I have a little triangle there. And if I were to place a hot cup of coffee right in the middle of that triangle, is that coffee going to spill on you, or is it going to spill into your lap? So we need to find that like Goldilocks position where it's like a perfect coffee table, okay, just for that coffee mug. And now from there, placing the hands down by the side once you found your neutral pelvis. That's what that's called, your neutral pelvis. And it may feel like there's a little bit of space between your low back. That's okay. And everybody's anatomy is different, so it's okay if you also don't have that space under your back. But now finding that left leg getting nice and heavy, very, very actively pressing down into the earth. And what do we notice about the right leg? So as you are exhaling, I want you to start to lift the right heel off of the ground. And then inhale, place it back down. Exhale, lift the heel, maybe the toes off the ground. And then inhale, place it back down. So our goal here is not to let the hips sink from side to side, the pelvis sink from side to side, but to keep that coffee, that hot cup of coffee on your lap there from moving or spilling from side to side. And now that right leg, because it's lifting off of the earth, doesn't mean that it's just like a wet noodle. I want you to keep that leg and foot active. So if I were to come over and like push on your knee in any direction, you're not gonna let me like push it off to the side, okay? So from there, let's do like 2 more. Inhaling to tap the foot back down. And exhale 1 more. And now holding that leg lifted, take an inhale, point the toe, reach the leg long, making sure that the low back didn't just lift off of the ground, but your spine stays engaged and the space between your ribs and your hips stays the same. And then exhaling to pull that leg back into tabletop. Inhale to reach. And exhale to pull. Now, if you're watching this video, it may seem like there's, oh, that looks easy. Like that looks, what is she doing? This is a full body experience, okay? So my hands are still pressing down. My left leg is nice and heavy, very, very active, as my right leg reaches away into the single leg stretch position and then pulls back in. So every time you're moving any part of your body, I want you to imagine you're pushing against an invisible force and then pulling that invisible force back in towards you. Let's do 1 more. Keep that leg long. And then as you exhale, point the toes up towards the ceiling. Inhale to lower the leg. And exhale to lift. Keeping the spine in its long, lengthy position to inhale and to exhale. 2 more. Exhale. If you had a Sharpie between your big toe and your second toe, are you able to draw that straight line up and down? Now bending that knee, placing the foot back down, and windshield wipering the legs side to side, soften the body. Whew. All right. Now let's work through the other side. I want you maybe like rocking the head side to side in opposition of where your knees are going, so that you feel that sort of release through the entire spine, okay? So making sure you're not clenching the jaw, there's no tension in like the actual face and neck, but you should feel that length from the top of the head, like somebody's pulling your head towards the wall behind you. Hands press down into the earth, right leg gets nice and heavy into the earth underneath of you. And from there, take that exhale to find that pelvic floor lift, that belly button drop, those ribs wrapping in, and the spine just got a little longer, okay? So now on your next exhale, that left leg lifts up and stays very active as you inhale to lower, tap down, exhale, lift. Inhale, lower, tap down, exhale, lift. So now see how my pelvis isn't rocking side to side. I have that coffee mug right there on my neutral pelvis, and it's staying nice and still. The coffee inside of it isn't even like wobbling. Maybe we got like a champagne flute, and that champagne flute isn't gonna wobble side to side. So now next time you exhale, lift that leg, hold it lifted into tabletop where the knee is over the hip, shin is parallel with the ground. Inhale, point the toes away from you, and exhale, pull back in. Remember, you're trying to push against that invisible force, and then pull it back into you. Inhaling to reach, exhaling to pull. Check in with the rest of the body. Is the neck still reaching long towards the wall behind you? Are the hands and arms still pressing into the earth? Is that right foot nice and heavy, and is the pelvic floor lifted, belly button dropping, ribs staying wrapped? Now the next time that leg reaches out, keep the toes pointed, leg stays long, and exhale, lift the leg from that core. Inhale, lower. As the leg is lifting up, making sure that low back didn't just sink down and you're getting lazy on me, but that spine stays long, and it's almost like you're like, no, don't want you to come here. Don't push, no, push it away. And then lowering down like you're trying to pull it back up in towards you. Okay, so that oppositional energy is created by you. Isn't that empowering? Now, what do we notice about the foot? We got 3 more here. As those toes stay pointed, are they pointed out at an angle? Are you rotating at the hip? Let's try to make sure we're keeping that leg nice and long and strong. There's 2. And then final one, when that leg lifts up, bend the knee, plant the foot down. Ooh, and again, windshield wiper those legs side to side. So it may not look like much, but it takes a lot of that mental focus, that physical focus to make sure that you're doing it correctly. Because what we're doing is we're teaching the body how to move with correct form. So now let's lay onto our side here and bringing our hand underneath of our head. Our heels, our hips, our heart, our head are all in line with each other. Knees are bent, and placing the top hand in front of the heart here. So now I want you to think about your top booty reaching towards those heels, and see what just happened to my underside. So this is my left side of my body, and it's not because I'm like trying to like pull away from the earth, but instead to lengthen the spine, to keep the hips stacked, to keep the shoulders stacked, and to press that hand into the earth to feel that core working. So now as we lift, I don't want you to think about lifting the knee at all. I want you to think about driving the top foot down and the bottom knee into the earth so that the top leg lifts on its own. And then as you inhale, lower back down. We'll do 4 here. So give me 3 more. Exhale, lift. Inhale to lower. Last 2. And then after that last one, place the knees back together again. And then slide that front knee forward, your top knee goes back, and then pressing yourself up into a mermaid seated position. So if this position is not accessible for you today, I want you to slide the legs off to the side, okay? And placing that other hand off to your hip side, okay? So from here, reaching up and think like St. Louis archway from hip to heel of the palm here on the left side of the body. So as you're arching up and over, you feel that side body stretch on the right side. Then inhaling up, grabbing onto your shin and pulling yourself over to the other side, okay? So if this feels okay, and then maybe coming back and trying out that mermaid seated position, you can reach over the shin and pull towards the right side, lifting up and reach over to press towards the left side. And play around with what feels good for the body. Inhale up, exhale over. Inhale up and maybe come down onto the forearm. This is like the other great thing about Pilates is you do what works best for your body. As long as you have the fundamentals of the movement, you're moving with the breath, and you're being aware of where the core is, of where your shoulders are, where are your hips, are they still in line with each other? Okay, so now let's swing the legs around, coming down onto your other side, heels, hips, heart, and head all in line. And think elbow heavy, rib cage heavy, hip heavy, and that top booty reaching towards the heels there, okay? Everything's active. You've got that little piece of yoga block or anything like a piece of paper between your knees, and then it's like you want to look at it and you're trying to drive the foot down to look at what was in between the legs. And then inhale, lower back down. Exhale to lift. Inhale, lower. And you can use your top hand here to kind of check in with your core, make sure that it is active. So that belly button is pulling in as that pelvic floor lifting up. If you go to the lower belly there, in between pubic bone and belly button, you'll feel, if that pelvic floor is working, that strong engagement from hip point to hip point. Last one. That leg lowers back down. Ooh, shaking. Shake and bake. Okay, so now as that leg lowers down, slide the top leg back behind you, bottom leg in front of you, either into that mermaid seated position and start to take your side bends. And remember that if that mermaid seat position isn't accessible for you today, you can bring the legs to stack on top, taking that mermaid stretch overhead, making that St. Louis archway on the right side of your body, reaching that left arm up, then grabbing onto the shin and pulling in the other direction. Now this can also be done in a seated position on a chair and grabbing onto the bottom of your chair and taking those side bends. So the side bends are very important for our extension that we're coming into next. So rolling yourself down onto your belly and keeping your forehead head plant or face plant yourself down into the earth here. Tops of the feet are pressing into the earth. And I do want your thighs to kind of roll out to the side. So our big toes are putting a lot of pressure into the mat there. And try to tailbone reaches towards the heels so that your belly button, you can feel that space trying to pull away from the earth there, okay? So then hands reaching down by the side, take an inhale and imagine that your shoulder blades are pulling back and away from the ears in order for the hands to reach down for the toes. Neck staying in line with the spine, exhale, lower back down. So as you're inhaling, the rib cage will expand naturally, and that will help the lift here. And as you exhale, lowering back down. If face planting into the ground does not feel good for you, you can come down onto the cheek. Let's do that one more time. And as you exhale, lower back down. Bring the hands underneath of the shoulders and pull yourself back into a child's pose. Hips to heels, knees open as wide as feels good. Maybe shimmy the hips side to side. Breathing deep into that low back, outer hip space. And then taking an inhale to come back up into your tabletop position. Maybe walking the feet forward and coming into your seated position. Give yourself a round of applause for getting through that 20 minutes of movement. Great way to start your day or even to end your day. So hopefully you feel a little bit more open through the hips, a little bit more stronger through the core, a little bit more wider through the shoulders. And give yourself a pat on the back for taking yourself through these 20 minutes of movement. Thanks again. My name was Bree, and I'll see you again next time.